Seems that today there's a lot of people coming in then.
Start with
You can start?
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
On the road.
Oh, okay. Okay. You can sometimes you need to have a slide. Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, you may start now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and especially our new friends. Good morning. I'm Shili Ye, and it's my honor to be here to make this presentation. And Lani is coming. Good morning, Lani.
Hello. Morning.
Okay, let's continue. And it's my honor to be here to make this presentation to all of you. I will be very appreciated that if you could give me some pieces of advice after my presentation. Okay, now let's go on. My research is on the entrepreneurship education comparative study of university transformation in Zhejiang, China. And next, please. And this is my tale of content. Today I will present 6 parts. The first one is research background, the second is literature review, the third is problem statements, and the research questions and research objectives, theoretical and conceptual frameworks. And the last part is about the research methodology. And in the last part, I will also give you an example of how I use my research methodology in my study. Okay, thank you, Hanif. Okay, now let's begin with the background of the study. Here are 3 key policies which shows the implementation background of EE. First, I will explain what does EE mean. EE means entrepreneurship education because it's too long, so I will use EE instead. Okay. In line with global trends, China experienced a rapid expansion in its higher education system since 1998, and especially large growth since the early 2000s. I'm one of the beneficiaries. And now 25 years has passed away, more and more social problems is carried out, especially the structure of employment for the graduates. Then the mass entrepreneurship and innovation policies was carried out in 2014, and a series of policies issued afterwards highlight the increasing importance of entrepreneurship and the parallel promotion of university-wide EE throughout the country. Next, please. Now in China, higher education transformation is taking out now. One is the decline of independent universities and institutions. Another is the promotion of vocational education. Firstly, independent university and institutions are the product of higher education expansion, but the declining policy is in the progress. Obviously, the independent universities and institutions will disappear in China soon. Secondly, is the promotion of vocational undergraduate education. In the past, undergraduate education only be taken in the universities. But now, with the promotion of vocational education, vocational undergraduate education has come out. Take Zhejiang province, for example. Here are 109 higher education universities and institutions. 60 are undergraduate education, including 2 vocational universities. One is public and one is private. Guess what will happen with the strong promotion of vocational education? I'm very certain that more vocational universities will appear in 2024 in Zhejiang. Okay, now let's move to the literature review. Thank you, Hanif. Okay, now we can see the objects of EE have been changed because of the transformation. Next, please, thank you. Okay, in examining the literature in the recent years, especially the 3 years, 3 major themes of research became evident. The first, Previous research has established that different kinds of higher education transformations are taking with society development. Second, EE is facing challenges. Last but most important is that I found that much of the current literature reviews of EE pays attention to entrepreneurial intentions. In addition, three major shortcomings became very clear. The first one is, as my listing, the first one is there are relatively few studies in higher education transformation on independent universities or vocational universities. While I have mentioned before, the transformations are taken in China. And secondly, out of my surprise, after the review of the researchers, I really found that, especially in the recent 3 years, very few Chinese scholars made continuous publications on EE English in recent years. What does the continuous publication mean? During my progress of the review of the recent 3 years, I found that maybe somebody they make a publication on EE this year, but really, what about next year? I mean, they doesn't focus on EE for a long time, a continuous time, but maybe on some time, maybe if the EE education, the topic is very popular or something else. And during my research, I found that there are only Huang Yangjie group. I mentioned this man in group 3, the last one, Yangjie Huang. I only found that his group has been made the continuous research, and I found during the literature review, I found lots of research on EE from his group, and fortunately that this guy is from Zhejiang, and I've seen him before. Yeah, he's very young. Yeah.
Zhejiang is where Alibaba is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the third shortcoming is that more recent attention.
I mean, can you lower? This is too cold. Can you lower the fan?
可以啊，可以啊，可以啊，没问题。
可以啊，可以啊。
可以啊，可以。
You can understand actually.
You can understand.
You can understand.
Okay, let's go on. The last part is I found that more recent attention has focused on the psychological, especially the entrepreneurial intentions. It's out of my surprise that I want to talk about the EE, focused on the education, but during my literature review, I found it's more concentrated on the psychological combination, and it's Ilmu is an expert about that. And so, next please. So this is my research statement. Actually, it's a research gap from my literature review. We can see that based on the previous studies, there was no there is no explanatory model of entrepreneurship education based on the higher education transformation, but the higher education transformation is actually taking in China now. Okay, next please, Hanif. Okay, now I am going to talk about my research questions and research objectives. Actually, when I design my research questions, it has some relationship with my methodology. So let's have a discussion. My research question, I have 3 research questions from the empirical, the actual, and the real. Later, I will explain that what does that mean because it has some relationship with my methodology. The first question is, what is the current state of EE in universities in Zhejiang? The second one is, what institutional events lead to current state of EE, especially in selected universities? I plan to choose 3 universities in Zhejiang. One is the most famous university, Zhejiang University, as it's doing the best program of EE, even in China. China. And the second one, maybe I will choose an independent university because it's a product of the higher education information in China. And the last university, I may choose a vocational university because it's a new thing in China. And I see that I guess that more and more vocational universities will appear in China very soon. The third question is, what are the generative mechanisms underlying this transformation? This is the very important, and this is the problems we should discover and try to solve it. Comparatively, I designed 3 research objectives. The first one is to examine the key events on AE among the selected universities. The second is to review the generative mechanisms on AE among the selected universities. The last one is to explain the commonalities and differences on AE among the selected universities. Thank you, Hami. Okay, next I'm going to talk about my theoretical and conceptual frameworks. It's my new thing in my slides because in my last presentation I didn't talk about this part. And now many theoretical perspectives have been developed for studying the notion of AE in higher education. After the review on the major concepts, constructs, and definitions to my study, I decide to use these 3 theoretical frameworks. Now I will make the explanation. The first one, theory of planned behavior. Maybe if is familiar about this, it's about some psychological part. The theory of planned behavior is part of the larger family of intentional models. I mentioned that I found that many literature reviews they focus on the intentional models on AE, and that have been used to try to explain the emergence of entrepreneur behavior. Especially, it focuses on the students, how and why they want to have the action of entry to start a business or want to join the EE. Okay, the second one is the experiential learning theories. It's an individual. Individual can acquire information in the world either through direct experiences or through a reaction of experiences. Don't worry that later I will give you a big picture.
Okay,
picture. Now I just want to make a summary of these 3 theories. And we can see the second picture. I mean the Cobble's and experiential learning cycle. It shows how the theory works. It also concentrates on the how the students have the reaction from the teaching from the teacher. They see, they feel the action, and actually it's a continuous circle. And the last part, the last theory is about institutional theory. Transformation of higher education in China is not only caused by external pressures, but because of initiative and interest of organizational actors who have institutional entrepreneurship. And later I will show you my conceptual framework, and I try to combine the in-center theory with my research. Okay, now next please.
Experiential theory.
So now I want to choose my this study offers a hypothetical model to provide a conceptual framework. As shown in the figure, the hypothetical model assumes that there are 3 levels of reality in the transformation progress. And it also has some relationship with my methodology, and we can see that there are the empirical, the actual, the real, and institutional theorists view the transformation of higher education in China is not only caused by the external pressures, but because of the initiative and interest of organizational actors who have institutional entrepreneurship. Now, I'm going to go to the PowerPoint.
Good.
Okay, actually, maybe our professor will be very familiar about this framework, right? Because it's from the Muzakir, right? Muzakir. After reading the thesis from Muzakir, I found that there is a problem because especially when Muzakir tried to find the mechanisms during the actual progress, I found that he found the mechanisms from the analysis, just the analysis by himself. So I want to try to find an easy way that whether we can have some guidelines of mechanisms. Then after my literature review, I found that maybe the institutional theory could give me a guideline. Let me introduce you to that. The empirical, it's events, it can be seen, and the actual, it means the occurrence. Sometimes you can see or you can't see. So how to find the mechanisms is a very important progress. So I suppose that whether we can put these frameworks inside it. Actually, it's a framework from other scholars and based on the institutional theory. It shows that when we analyze an action, we make an analysis from these 4 parts. The first one is the organizational environment. The second one is the institutional or regulatory environment. The third one is the social environment forces. And the last one is the individual factors. I mean that maybe we can use the reduction, and when we find the mechanisms, we can analyze these four factors. Maybe it comparatively with Muzakir's starting, maybe it's a easy way. You don't have to analyze it, and I found that in Muzakir's research, in every important event, the mechanisms have been analyzed from so different factors, not a certain, and don't have some guidelines. So I want to have a guideline, and you can save some time. So, and the last one is factors. Okay, let's go on. Thank you, Hamid. The next part is my research methodology. My research methodology including 2 parts. The first one is the case study method. It means that I will choose 3 selected universities in my research. And the second one is the qualitative research, especially means the retrospective research strategy. It have the theoretical, the actual, and the real. Later I will give you an example. Thank you, Honey. So first I want to introduce all of you the retrospective research strategy. It includes 4 steps. The first step is to description of the events. The second is identification of the structures of components. The third is the theoretical description, and the last one is retrospective. Okay, next one. So let me give you an example. For example, I want to make an analysis of EE in Zhejiang University. The first step is that actually it's a case study. So from the first step, I should find some key events from the Zhejiang EE in Zhejiang University. I just take an example. Maybe it should be first, second, third, fourth, or many others. So the step 2 is to make a retrospective analysis from the empirical, the actual, and the real. Now, let me show you how I will analyze it. Thank you, honey. Okay. Okay.
Okay, continue. Yeah.
Okay. Let me take chapter 4 for example. Let me name the chapter 4 is EE in Zhejiang University. So in chapter 4, there are 4 points. The first one is the introduction. The second one is the brief history. Actually, it's an answer of it's the part of the answer of my questions, because my research questions I mentioned before is what is the current state of EE in Zhejiang, China, and now I give part of the answer because I list what is the current state of EE in universities in Zhejiang. I will answer other parts of the answers in my other chapters. So next one is the most important, the key events of EE in Zhejiang. Now, I'm sorry. So when I analyze the key events of EE in Zhejiang, I will use the retroductive in every key event analysis. Let me take the first key event for example. As I mentioned that I've already introduced you the 4 steps of retroduction. The first step, the first, the second, the third, and the last one. So now I want to use the retroduction in my analysis. So take the first key event for example. The first step, you should make a description of the first event. What is and something like that. The second step is identification of structures and context. And the third part and the last part I think is the most important one. The third part is about the theoretical descriptions. That means you should find out the mechanisms I mentioned that. So I mentioned that Mozaker in his thesis, he tried to find the mechanisms based on the step A and step B. But in my conceptual frameworks, I've mentioned that, is there any easy way? Shall I analyze the mechanisms just according to my conceptual framework? Does it will work? I'm not so sure, but it's my idea. And the last part is to make a retroduction. In that means how the mechanisms help the events happen. So the last part is the step B retroduction is an analysis step. So I will use the same way to make an analysis for the second key event, third key event, and this is only chapter 4. As I mentioned that I supposed to make analysis the comparative studies with 3 universities. So I also will use the retroductives when I make the analysis of the other 2 universities. Okay, and the last part of chapter 4, maybe you make a conclusion about the generating mechanisms of all the key events of EE. I mean the first to the third key events. Okay, thank you.
Whoa.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your watching.
Half an hour, right? That's good. Okay, where do we start? There are a lot of different places that I can start giving my feedback or comments on it. Or maybe some of you want to share your thoughts about PS presentation just now. Question, comments? No?
I think the form is very good. It's just a real presentation instead of just read. Maybe.
Yeah, it's actually
yeah. During the process, and she can really show her feelings, her thinkings, and the research process. Yeah, I think this is very good.
That's right. I agree on that one. All right. I'm glad that you have reached this stage. Now, a number of things here I want to say first. If you can go back to the first one, just make sure everything is fine here. We don't have to use the word "the." It's entrepreneurial education. When it goes to third. Okay. Alright, okay. But now, let's go to the next one. Okay. Here, can I look at research background and then you move to the next slide as well? I just want to compare.
There is a conclusion. The last one. Next, please. Hanif, no, next one. And yeah, this is a whole.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, right? Slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. All the research program. Okay. Here, first of all, I want to discuss with all of you. This is the thing that is important to have group supervision, because what Ian has presented, a lot will be connected to the rest of you all as well in terms of research proposal presentation and other presentation. And this is one example, which is speed of presentation. So at the beginning, your speed of presentation was like super speed, very fast.
Oh.
Right? So the first few 2 or 3 slides were going really fast, and then towards the end, when you were explaining the reproductive research, and then this is where you were going deeper, and the speed was just right. So you want to adjust your speed so that it is not too fast. Right? The first 2, 3 slides here. And the more important point is that I'm not sure whether the explanation, maybe, probably, a lot of it has to do with the speed, right? But it is clear what the problem is. The audience might not know what's the issue here, what's the problem here. You do have problem statement? Do you have problem statement here somewhere?
Yeah.
Right?
Please.
Yeah, okay. Alright, you do have problem statement here, alright. See, problem statement, you're actually leading to the whole research, right? But before that, if you go back to the research background, you actually, here you're already problematizing, right? Already problematizing. So you want to be able to convey to the audience, what the problem is, right? So we're talking about entrepreneurial education. How is this entrepreneurial education affecting the transformation of university education? Then you talk about the vocational university, things like that. So maybe what will help is at the end of your slide, if you go down there, you have a little summary of what you say. So you say, okay, so the point here is, the essence of the slide is, so immediately you capture the attention of the audience about what you want to present on that particular slide. Or at least the research background, and if you scroll up, down a bit, down, up. So here, before that, you still this not before that. Here you have the conclusion. You just want to emphasize what is the essence of this. What's the summary? What's the main thing you want to convey here, right? Now, okay, it's good that you move to the front to explain. So you want to position yourself maybe closer to the slide next time, but then because we have our camera and all, this is another factor. So the next time during your presentation, you might want to sit closer there, and then if you feel that you want to stand and explain, go ahead. Right? Sometimes people like to walk. I don't think it's quite necessary to walk, but you're not really making a speech here, your presentation, proposal presentation, right? So sit and stand. I personally find it more powerful powerful to stand than sit. That will be me, because presentation is very much visual, so you want to use your visual. So when you see the visual is only half, then you stand you use the body, right? So that's why PowerPoint. That's why PowerPoint takes away power from the person, because people will look at the slide instead of the person. Right? So by your standing next to the slide, people can shift their attention to you. Yeah. So that's a good thing. So in presentation, it's good to have the person instead of that thing. Then like what Hanif did last time, you were walking around, which is fine too. Right? And then you have that. What is it? As long as it's appropriate and effective, that's good. If it's not appropriate, okay, you go that way. The evaluators will have to look at you at the back. It will be difficult. But the evaluators is somewhere there, you'll be walking and still having the eye contact. And you eye contact with the evaluators is fine.
You are just there, that means you couldn't repeat all your words because.
Yeah, of course. So it's good. You were talking about the numbers a bit, right? I think it's in your research background still. Maybe scroll up a bit. You were talking about the numbers of the universities or the vocational universities and all that. Where was it? Which slide was it? This one? No, the previous one. No, up there. But the numbers are not there. But you did talk about the numbers. This one, yeah. Huh?
No, before my last slides, I typed it very clearly, 3 universities, but now I make a change. I just mentioned that the selected universities.
Okay. What I mean is, no, you were talking about the number of universities.
Oh, no.
The statistics in Zhejiang,
no,
right?
no.
You did have that.
Yeah, I just.
So you might want to put it up here, because maybe they say, oh, we are giving a picture of Zhejiang's universities, right? So out of so many universities, you're choosing that, right? Put the numbers of statistics or something like that. Where else? Okay, that is the numbers. So you want to again to make sure the audience understand what the problem is, what the issues are, right? Why are we studying this entrepreneurial education and the transformation of the university?
So do you think that I should make it more clear about the problems?
You be clear about that. They want to understand what is this entrepreneurial education, right? You actually have the years, right? And it is a government policy to have entrepreneurial education, right? And maybe the why we have the entrepreneurial education, right? And then in your problematizing, you were also saying that even non-vocational universities also have to teach entrepreneurial education, right? So that creates different kind of pressure or condition, affect the curriculum and all that. So that is something that you want to basically you want to say about the issues connected to your topic, right? By the way, we also have that situation in Malaysia as well. You have entrepreneurial education, usahawanan in Unisa. You have to take it or not? You have to, right? First semester, right? So it's a compulsory, right? Compulsory. So
Master class.
yeah, it's a compulsory class. Same in Malaysia, we have that too.
How many kind of 201?
Yeah.
Sell products.
It's a Sabah as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's compulsory.
it's compulsory. Yeah.
There's one semester.
Yeah. It is newly introduced about the last 10 years or something like that, more or less. It's not. It hasn't been here before. So, but in the last 10 years, the government decided to make it compulsory. So we have to teach the whole of United States of Malaysia, USM.
So who are the teachers?
Yeah.
Where are the teachers from?
From business.
From business school, from whoever who think they are good at business. So my son will say, he listened to, Andrew Tate. Yeah, okay.
Oh.
The men will know, the women will not know. The boys will know, the girls will not know. By the way, there's a dangerous thing. Right? So Andrew Tate said, you want to go to university? Go check the car park first. Check the car park. Right? What cars do they drive? Do they drive a Bugatti or Ferrari? Or, you want to be rich? Go to a place where they drive cars. So it's very entrepreneurial thinking. This is a
Only in the middle school, right?
no, they say basically don't go to university, go to, because we lecturers, we teachers don't drive big cars, we don't drive fast cars, so he's an entrepreneurial guy, basically. But it's the same line of thinking of a lot of entrepreneurs, from him to Donald Trump to Robert Kiyosaki. You know Robert Kiyosaki? Probably seen his book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Fu Papa. Okay, right. Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Okay. And by the way, is a student of his. I've taken his classes, many of his courses. So there's the whole idea of entrepreneurial education is actually born out of this movement to get people to become entrepreneurs. Also a movement behind this economic condition where they want students to graduate and become entrepreneurs and businessmen and women, so that they don't have problem with unemployment, right? Because if you graduate, you become employees, you look for jobs, right? So the government cannot solve the problem of employment all the time. They get the people to become entrepreneurs and businessmen and women so that they create jobs. So basically that's part of the, if you want to look at the generative mechanism, that's actually one of them, the economic condition that is creating this whole entrepreneurial education.